Thank you for joining the English UK LT conference. This part of the conference has been designed for those of you that are in the classroom, and we hope that you're going to take away a lot of ideas from today's session. Also, a big thank you to our host, Trinity College London, and to Macmillan Education, whose support means that we've been able to put on this element of the conference for you at no charge, which is great because we wanted this conference to be accessible to as many teachers as possible. And we're thankful for all of you that have come to join us this afternoon. This session, I'm joined today by Abby Croucher from Lewis School of English. She's here to speak to you about the challenges and successes of designing online courses for teachers, something that she's had experience of at her school for a couple of years now, and a skill that they developed further through the PRELIM project. If you have any questions for Abby, she'll be happy to take these at the end of her presentation, and then she'll ask you to either raise your hands or to pop your comments in the chat box at that time. So for now, I'm just going to hand over to Abby. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Roz, and thank you everybody else for joining me today as well, coming along to listen to what I've got to say. So as Roz said, we've got a little bit of experience of designing online courses, not lots, but we've certainly got some experience of designing online courses. And for this particular talk, I thought I would focus on the remote learning aspect of it and how we can go about making remote learning feel a little bit less remote. This is within the context of us taking part in the recent PRELIM projects, which you may or may not have heard of. You may or may not have been involved in. Perhaps, I don't know, people could put their hand up if they were involved in any PRELIM projects. Be good to show a little show of hands. Oh yeah, a few people there. Great, good to see some familiar faces as well. Well, for those of you that don't know, just a little bit of background to PRELIM and what it is. So this stands for Partnered Remote Language Improvement Project. And this was something that was designed to support the development of English language teachers all around the world. So the idea was to make professional development accessible to far more people with support and through partnerships, and to help teachers of English in other countries grow in confidence in their ability to do that. So there were some very important partnerships for these projects. It was funded by the British Council and run jointly by the British Council, IATEFL and English UK. And then NILE were brought in as managing consultants to oversee the project. And the way it worked was these partnerships were set up between English teaching associations who are the UK partners would put in their proposals for courses, and the ETAs would put in proposals as well, and matched together to work together. By the way, I apologise if my internet is a bit patchy. It's one of those days today. So the idea was that once we'd been partnered, we would go about creating a bespoke course, a tailored course, and the English Teaching Association would help us to understand what the needs of their teachers were, so we could design that course effectively. So that's a little bit of background to what PRELIM is. There was one universal aim throughout, so to increase levels of confidence in the English language classroom. Now, there are lots of different ways that you can do that, obviously, and each partnership had a completely different focus because ways in which confidence could be achieved were varied. But ultimately, it was all about confidence. It wasn't about getting from this level to that level, it was about confidence. So PRELIM 1, this took place over 2020, 2021, and there were 20 partnerships, so 20 UK centres and 20 English teaching associations. Very excited that PRELIM 2 also took place. So this was 2021 to 2022. It was literally just finished a few weeks ago. This reached out to 40 partnerships. And I believe, this is kind of an estimate, but I believe that almost 6,000 teachers around the world have been reached through these projects. So it's a very high impact thing to be involved in. So for Prelim 1, Lewis School of English put in a proposal, and we were lucky enough to be accepted. And we were matched with the English Teaching Association in Honduras, which was fantastic. We knew very little about Honduras, and we worked with them very closely, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And for Prelim 2, we were matched with TESOL, Italy, so a little bit closer to home. And again, very, very lucky with our partnership. We had a great partnership, worked very well together, really enjoyed working with their teachers. They were very, very different projects, but plenty of similarities in our approach. One of the key differences was that with our teachers in Honduras, they tended to be very low level. So we were working predominantly with A1, A2 level speakers who were English teachers. So confidence was a huge thing. We heard that they were trying to be a couple of steps ahead of their students in the learning process. So you can understand why they needed that support and they needed that confidence booster. Italy was a little bit different. So in Italy, the teachers were much higher level. They'd studied English to a high level. They were very, very competent English users, but they weren't getting the opportunity to practice it. And they weren't getting support from native speakers of English. So they needed confidence in other ways, if you like. But the important thing before we designed our online courses for these two different contexts was to get some background, find out more about them, and not just language needs, but contextual information. So I've got just some examples. This isn't a complete list, but just a few examples. So some of the things that became really important to understand was Prelim 1, our project started just as they were about to embark on some long holidays in Honduras. But we didn't know what that meant. We thought, well, maybe that will be a good thing because they're teachers and they'll have more time if they're not working. Or maybe national holidays are a time for everyone to go off and visit family, and so nobody's going to attend. But as it happened, everybody was in lockdown, so nobody was going anywhere. So we had a bit of a captive audience. But it was important to understand what they had going on in their lives at that time, if they had time to commit to this project. Also, connectivity was something that was particularly important in Honduras. A lot of them didn't have access to internet. Some of them didn't even have devices. And once that had been established, the Prelim organisers were great because there was an additional connectivity fund that was made available to make sure that people could actually access the course itself. So it was all very well us providing them with a free course, but if they couldn't get on the internet, that was of little use. So that connectivity fund was really important, and the English Teaching Association helped to identify those people that needed those devices and those data packages. They had just had a hurricane, which delayed a few things. That was very important to understand and to know. And obviously the time difference needed to be accounted for. So that had an impact on when Prelim 2 with Italy, again, some very different concerns, all very about the of schools where teachers were sent demands. This was a new thing to me. That had an impact. Also, transition, like we all were. Some people were still teaching online, people were teaching face to face, and they had to be ready at any moment to transition. Understand their weekly schedules, when would they have time and how much time would they have to commit to a course, and what were their expectations. So we learned that in Italy, it was fairly standard for a professional development course to consist of 25 hours of input. So that was a good thing for us to aim at. Okay, this is what they're used to, this is what they expect. So the English teaching associations were essential in gaining this understanding of the context of this course that we were designing. And it required a shift in mindset, the prelim projects, because typically with an online course, there would be a certain process that we would go through. So prior to prelim, when we had designed our online courses, it might look something like this. So we sensed a demand. Maybe we'd had some inquiries, some queries. We understood that this is something that people want. So we would go about creating a course that we hoped would meet that demand. Once the course had been completed, we would then reach out to the people that we hoped it would benefit and say, right, we've designed this course. Who wants it? Who wants to sign up? Who wants to attend? However, with prelim, this was a little bit different. So the very first step was identifying the participants, the course participants. And then, as I explained, through the English teaching associations, really trying to understand who these people were, where they were based, what their teaching context was, and what they needed. And once we'd got all of that information, then we were in a position to design something that would really, really meet their needs. So you can see this kind of flipped that whole process around from us. So usually the participants would be the last course of action, whereas on the prelim courses, they were the very first step. It was all about the course participants. So this was quite refreshing. But that said, we have designed bespoke courses before, and this is in essence a bespoke course. However, it still felt different, and I tried to get my head around, why does this feel different to other bespoke courses that we've created? And this was my conclusion that I came up with. So I think previously when we've created bespoke courses, it's because people have found out about us. Maybe they've kind of things we do, and they want something similar. Design a course for these people, of course. But again, prelim was different because this was us going to them. This was us joining their content. Who we were kind of irrelevant because we had to focus on these participants and what they needed, and that was no match to anything that we'd done before. Okay, so once we had made this contact with the English teaching associations, we needed to decide, right, we know the participants, how are we actually going to reach those participants? What platforms are we going to use? So components for the course, but we knew that we also needed to have a means for more general communication with the participants. So for the weekly sessions on both prelim courses, we were told that Zoom was probably the easiest thing. This is what the participants were already. So that was quite straightforward. For the asynchronous tasks, Honduras had told us that Facebook was quite commonly used for professional development courses, which was a new thing for us. When we came to do Prelim 2 with Italy, it was Google Classroom. So we were told a lot of the participants would be familiar with Google Classroom, so that might be the easiest platform to use. And then for the more general communication, the more ad hoc communication, we were told that WhatsApp would be a good choice for that particular thing. So we decided on the technology, and for Prelim 1, after this conversation with the ETA, I went back to our teachers to discuss this. So Zoom. So to start with, some of the feelings about Zoom, myself included, was I'm really, really glad that I very recently learned how to use Zoom a lot. we'd already been using it for online classes. It was quite straightforward, and it seemed like an easy option for us. So that was good that we were able to use something we were familiar with. When it came to Facebook, this was quite an unusual one because we all used Facebook, but we hadn't really used it for work purposes or professional development or for courses. So there were a few questions around that. So we were familiar with the platform, but okay, well, we'll need to look into it. How would it work? What would it look like? How would people navigate the Facebook page? We had the whole issue of teachers, for obvious reasons, not wanting to use their personal Facebook accounts, so having to set up new accounts. So that was something that we needed to explore further, but we had familiarity with the platform itself. And then when it came to WhatsApp, again, a few questions around, well, is this necessary? Do we need WhatsApp if we've got Zoom and we've got Facebook? We'll need to get work numbers. It wasn't a given that we all had work phone numbers. We weren't really sure at the beginning of the course what it would be used for, how it would be used, what's it going to add to the course. And then there was that dreaded fear that once we're on WhatsApp, we're going to be constantly receiving messages the whole time. Think about how this is going to work in practice and how it's going to look and feel in practice. So one kind of cutting to the end a little bit, just to focus on these platforms. How did it work out? Zoom was quite straightforward. So there were some connectivity issues for the course participants, for some, which recordings were essential so they could catch up on those later. Facebook, it was actually a good means for making the asynchronous tasks accessible. We discovered something, I don't know if anybody else knows about this, but there is something on Facebook called units or guides, learning units, where you can create a group and you can organize tasks, and you can create little modules, which I wasn't aware of. So when we discovered that automatically made Facebook a much easier platform to use. However, there were some glitches because Facebook decided to change the terminology halfway through our course from guides or units to guides. Also some glitches with our teachers' accounts because we were setting up multiple accounts. They thought they were fraudulent and shut them all down. So a few things to overcome, but you know, essentially it was fit for purpose. It worked pretty well. Since then, I've learned that it's no longer a free resource, which is a little bit of a shame, but we managed to get in there just before that changed. And then WhatsApp. So like I say, myself, I was a little bit kind of skeptical about how it might work, but in reality, it was so much fun. This was where I think a lot of the engagement came on the course. These little exchanges, these ad hoc exchanges, these spontaneous moments. It kind of, that's where relationships were made, in my opinion, during the course. Now, these are some examples. They're not exact examples, but they're pretty close to the original exchanges of how WhatsApp was used. So here's one example of an exchange between teacher and students. So yes, we woke up one day in February and there was snow everywhere, and all of our students at Lewis School were having snowball fights. So we decided to tell our Honduran teachers about this and say, look what's happening in the UK. And that got quite a nice response, a little response about, have you ever seen snow? Have you ever had a snowball fight? So it's this little insight into each other's worlds, nothing to do with the course, nothing related to the course content. So a little reminder from the teacher on WhatsApp was always handy, a little, hey, don't forget to finish your tasks, or hey, log on time today. Hey, don't forget, lesson starts in 1 hour. What was really interesting about the use of WhatsApp on the course was that in the beginning, the very first messages that were exchanged on WhatsApp by the participants were 100% in Spanish. I don't know if they realized that we didn't speak Spanish. This is maybe not unusual because they were, as I said, A1, A2 kind of level, and also lacking in confidence in their English. But as the course progressed, they became a lot more active on WhatsApp, and not just more active, but in English, but also policing each other. So if somebody wrote something in Spanish, then somebody else might say, hey, don't forget, in English. And the teachers ended up having to say very little because there was a lot of this, this self-policing. So don't forget the lesson tonight. And then one student would say, well, what time is it? And another student would reply, it's the same time, it's at 6 o'clock. And then someone else would say, I can't find the link. And another student, it's the same link, I'll send it to you now. So we started to see these really, really nice interactions between the students themselves. And again, I think this was quite motivating. There was always a flurry of activity after these types of exchanges, and tasks would get completed and handed in. There were also lots and lots and lots and lots of these. This was the response to anything. So, hey, happy Friday, you'd get a picture of a unicorn. You know, lessons in 1 hour, Snoopy does a little dance. So, I mean, it was great. It was just a bit of silly fun. And I have to say, it wasn't just the course participants. The Lewis School teachers, we had our own little WhatsApp group, and it kind of took the same route as well. So most communication happened in this format. And it just injected a little bit of personality, I like to think. However, WhatsApp wasn't the only way that we wanted our participants to engage with each other. So we had set up our course to work as weekly modules, and they all followed quite a formulaic structure because we wanted the participants to be familiar with what was coming each week. We didn't want to give them a different series of tasks each week where they had to get their heads around what they needed to do and how. So we kept it simple. Every week there was a reading task, there was a listening task, a collaborative task, and a reflection task. And the collaborative task was another opportunity for us to try to get these participants really engaging with each other and using the language in a very practical way. So these are just a few examples of the types of collaborative tasks that we ask the participants to do. So, for example, if the target language was functional phrases for giving advice, the collaborative task would be classroom-based. So imagine you have an issue with some behaviour in one of your classes and you want to ask for some advice. One participant would pose the problem or the question, and the others would respond with advice on how to manage that situation. Similarly, we had some target language sequences for giving instructions. So the collaborative task involved using the target language to write a set of instructions for a classroom game, play the game and send you their results. That might be a picture of something they'd made, it might be a text that they had created. So again, very practical classroom-based activities. And then functional phrases for giving praise or encouragement. So again, you know, A is the teacher, B is the student, ask a question, the student can get it right or get it wrong, and the teacher has to respond accordingly with the functional language that they had studied. So they could be saying things like, excellent, you've made really good progress there, or almost, have another go. So we wanted to make sure that the collaborative activities were setting them up for ways in which they could use this language straight away in their own classrooms. We didn't want them to have to learn a structure that they then needed to adapt and come up with their own examples. There was a lot of functional language that they could literally just learn, practice in that safe environment, and the next day go into their classrooms and start using it with confidence straight away. So that was very important to us. So at the end of Prelim 1, we wrote our report, we reflected on it, and then we were delighted later that year to hear that there would be a Prelim 2. that was fantastic. We signed up straight away and we hoped that we would be taken on for Prelim 2 because it was such a great experience. But we wanted, although we knew it was going to be a completely different course, completely different participants, there was a lot that we had learned from Prelim 1 that we wanted to take into Prelim 2, but some things that we wanted to build on as well. So one of the things that did work well was WhatsApp for informal communication, spontaneous communication. We'd seen firsthand that that had worked. So when our Italian English Teaching Association said, yes, WhatsApp is quite commonly used for this type of purpose, we thought, well, that's great because we can continue to use it to engage the participants and motivate them and get to know them a little bit. Also the collaborative tasks. So we were keen to make sure that there continued to be an element of collaboration, really with that practical use of target language, classroom-based practice. Also target language that could be lifted and used straight away. We discovered that was quite motivating because in our reflection tasks at the end of each module, participants were asked, was the language useful? How confident do you feel in your ability to use this language? And we got some really good responses from people saying, I've started using it already. I've already gone into my classroom and I've tried this and I've used that. So I think the fact that it could be immediately applied, that helped with that universal aim of increasing confidence. However, we still had a couple of questions that I suppose we wanted to get our heads around and we wanted to build on going into Prelim 2. So one of those questions was, how can we include opportunity to build their confidence before they're required to use the target language? And this comes about because they had opportunities to practice it, but confidence, how do you make that tangible, that we've actually factored in opportunities to building confidence? So that was something we wanted to try to address. And the other thing that we came away from Prelim 1 thinking was, how ongoing space for participants to share ideas and communicate and collaborate? Because when we reached the end of 1, we had our final session, we had our closing ceremony, we all said goodbye, it was all very positive, and then it was just over. Is that a lot of the course materials we had hosted on our own platforms, and so beyond the end of the course they wouldn't have access to that, and they potentially wouldn't have access to each other either unless they made an effort to actually proactively exchange phone numbers, which some of them did, which was lovely. But we wanted to factor that into our course design going into Prelim 2. So that first question, how can we include opportunities to build their confidence? Well, we made a little bit of a switch around because in Prelim 1, each module started with a live session. And that live session was used to introduce new language. So it was a language lesson, essentially. The language was presented in that class. And then after the live session came the asynchronous components. So this was where the participants could go away and further practice it through reading tasks, listening tasks, language tasks, pronunciation tasks, collaboration tasks. This worked okay, but one of the drawbacks of doing it this way round was that if a participant couldn't attend the live session, or maybe they wanted to attend but they had connectivity issues, that made it very difficult for them to go into the asynchronous tasks because they hadn't had that opportunity to explore the language with the teacher and with their peers, or to ask questions that they might have. So we thought maybe going into Prelim 2, we'll try to switch this around. So we'll start with the asynchronous tasks. We'll start with the activities that participants can do on their own. Then they can study the language, they can understand the language, they can practice the language, they can do their collaborative tasks. And the live session is an opportunity to bring it all together, consolidate that, and put it into practice. And what we'd hoped through doing that was that they had had more opportunity to build confidence in the target language before they were required to use it in front of each other and in front of the teacher. And it meant that come the live session, actually, they were really good at demonstrating, I've looked at this language, I've done these tasks, and this is what I'm now able to say. And they were quite enthusiastic about speaking up and getting involved. So this seemed like a positive switch for Prelim 2. The other question that we had was about creating a community of practice. So I mentioned that when Prelim 1 finished, it all seemed to be a bit of an abrupt end. So there was lots of sharing, there was lots of good practice, there was lots of collaboration, but there wasn't really a platform for that to be formally carried forwards. An example of how enthusiastic on Prelim 2 our participants were about sharing, this is an example. Somebody found a quote about teaching, they posted it on the WhatsApp group, they liked it, they wanted to know if other people agreed with this quote because it was something that resonated with them. Somebody else had found some quizzes on Kahoot that they tried with their 6-year-old students and they worked really well. So they posted the link and said, if anyone else wants to have a go, this is a really good activity, click on the link. In the Google Classroom, some of them created activities themselves for their students and said, I've just made this. Anybody want to have a go? Click on the link, you can do it too, have a look, give me some feedback. And another example on Google Classroom of sharing other platforms. So, oh, I found this good website. It's really good for creating your own games. It's good for younger students. It's good for vocabulary. So there was lots and lots of sharing going on between our participants without prompting. They took it upon themselves to share these ideas very proactively, and they were very, very keen to do this. They were very appreciative as well of each other's contributions. So we wanted to make sure they were able to continue to do that. So at the end of Prelim 2, on the TESOL Italy page, so it was no longer hosted on our platform, this was on their platform, so they would have access to it beyond the course itself. We created a classroom for all of the participants, which was their community of practice, and this was their space to stay in touch, continue to build those relationships that they had established, continue to share ideas beyond the course itself. And yeah, little links to webinars and things like this. So what we're really hoping, because obviously we only finished a few weeks ago, is that this will be a space that they take control of themselves so that they can stay in touch and continue to support each other in their development as teachers. So to conclude, there are lots and lots of different things about Prelim that I could comment on, but for this talk, I'd wanted to focus on that remote learning and the name remote learning, because it can feel very remote. We can feel very isolated, I think. The things that helped to make people feel less isolated, it was this multimedia approach. So finding the platforms that were fit for purpose. There was never going to be one size fits all. So Zoom was great for the live sessions. Facebook and Google Classrooms were great for making asynchronous material available, but ultimately WhatsApp was also important to kind of motivate people and engage them and say, hey, how are we doing? How's everyone getting on? And I don't think any one platform could have achieved all of those things. So that multimedia approach was quite key, I think, to making people feel more connected. Also, regular interaction to build those relationships, engage and motivate. So even if it wasn't course related, just a little post every now and then, how's everyone doing? Happy Friday, sun's shining here today. That helped to keep people engaged and motivated and feel like it was more than just a course of materials. These were relationships that were being built. The collaborative tasks created a safe space for them to practice using the target language with each other. And I think this provided them with some meaningful engagement with the course content and with each other. So they had to get in, say, hey, I've done my part. Are you okay? Do you have time to do your part? And then we can finish it and we can present it to the class at the end of the week. So I think they really thrived on those opportunities to work together, actually, rather than independently. Cultural exchanges, whether those were formal or informal, really enhanced the whole experience. And I say formal and informal because there was a lot of cultural exchange that just happened as and when. But we also factored in a couple of modules to focus specifically on culture. And this was because we had learned that the participants were not only interested in British culture, but they wanted to be able to tell their students about it. They wanted to be able to say, did you know that in the UK they do this? And did you know that this is a special day and they celebrate it in this way? So it wasn't just for their own interest. They liked information to be able to pass on to their learners. And also that this community of practice, this platform to share ideas, to interact, to continue those relationships, I think that helped everybody to also feel very connected beyond the course and beyond the lessons. Yeah, they made friends, and there was a platform for that friendship to continue. However, I've talked about all of this from the perspective of our participants, but I did draw some more conclusions. Yes, remote learning, it can feel remote, but remote teaching can also feel very remote. And I don't know about you, I imagine there's a lot of us that in the last couple of years have found ourselves in a situation where we're working remotely and we're teaching remotely. And that can be tough. So funnily enough, when we were working on this prelim project, we had a multimedia approach of our own. So the Lewis School teachers had their own WhatsApp group where we would say, hey, just had a really good lesson with our students. One student did this, I was really impressed. And also to send lots of funny pictures and videos. But we also had our weekly Zoom calls where we would find out how it was going, share ideas for the next module. And of course, just email communication, here's a few documents. So that multimedia approach was important for us as a team as well. And that regular interaction, because we weren't seeing each other face to face during prelim 1. We were all working at home during lockdown. So that regular interaction with the team of teachers was also really important. We had our own version of collaborative tasks because we were creating bespoke listening materials. So every week, the teachers would write a script for their module. And in our Zoom calls, we would record those audios for them to use with their students. So we were all working together to say, oh, I've written this script. Do you mind reading this bit? Do you mind reading this bit? And it was nice to get little insights into the different groups and the different classes and what they were studying. So we were also supporting each other through collaborative tasks. We were also really interested to share what we'd learned about our participants. So, oh, you know, there were a load of chickens running around in the background. So all these little things about, you know, little insights into their context and home life, and sharing that amongst ourselves and telling each other, well, what do we think they might be interested in knowing about us? What can we tell them about us? What can we share about us? And then thinking about prelim as a whole, the bigger prelim project. Obviously, Lewis School was involved in our projects, but there were all these other partnerships that were working on a massive range of courses, a range of participants, a range of needs. And as part of the prelim experience, we were part of a community of practice where we could share ideas and meet regularly and interact. And that certainly helped me to feel very connected and a lot less remote when taking on a project like this. So I really want to finish by saying thank you to the British Council and to IATEFL and English UK, because the opportunity to be involved in prelim was a really, really enjoyable one. It's one of the most enjoyable projects I've been involved in. And I'd particularly like to thank Rose and Martin from Nile, because they personally supported me and plenty of others throughout the whole process on a one-to-one basis as well. And it's just been a really positive experience. So we've got everything crossed that there might be a prelim 3. And if there is, I'm hoping that maybe a few more people will be able to get involved now. Perhaps you've heard a bit more about it that you didn't know. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for your time. And I think we've got a couple of minutes. If anybody's got any questions that they would like to ask, then feel free.
Indeed, we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. If you've got a question, you can pop it into the chat box, or alternatively, if you'd like to raise your hand, then Abby will know that you'd like to speak.
Yeah, Martin, I've got everything crossed, and Neil for prelim 3, so here's hoping.
In the chat box, I'm actually sharing a link which is to the English UK website page about the prelim project. If anybody would like to sort of discover a bit more about the partnerships and read the report on prelim 1. It's been wonderful to hear Abby's enthusiasm about the project, and I know that it's something that sort of at all levels of participants have felt. I think a quote from Roy from the British Council was that it wasn't just a piece of work, it was exciting and fulfilling. It's been such a positive shot in the arm. It was such a people to people thing.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So, I mean, I'm sure that, oh, okay, I see there's a question that just what's prelim 1 and prelim 2 briefly, please. Do you want to
Yeah, so very, very briefly, it was English improvement. It was to help the language development and to increase levels of confidence in teachers of English all around the world. And it was funded, there were partnerships set up between UK schools and English teaching associations in a massive range of countries around the world. And together they would work to create bespoke online courses to help teachers in those regions develop their levels of confidence in the English language classroom. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what the projects were about.
Great. I think we're actually come to an end in terms of time, and it's been fantastic to hear your insights onto the challenges that you faced and sort of the differences of your experience of the 2 versions of the project and how sort of everybody worked together, and the importance of partnership and relationship building, cultural exchange and collaborative content at all levels, not just between the tutor and students, but between tutors themselves, between different organisations, between stakeholders. Such a sort of valuable lesson for everyone to learn. So thank you once again, Abby, for leading this session. It's really inspiring content. And thank you to the delegates who've joined us today.